Los rapper is headed to prison on gun charges. Arthur Presley, also known as 30 Deep Grimeyy, was already a convicted felon when he was caught with a gun.
If something can trigger me and I can turn up instantly, it'll be the old me all over again, a monster.
Big Grimeyy got down, nigga. Me and Grimeyy took the city, now these capping on the motherfucker. Only
Arthur Presley, better known as 30 Deep Grimeyy, is one of those rappers whose presence alone can send chills down your spine. I mean, just take one look at that sinister smile of his. It's the kind of smile that tells you there's more to him than just his music. And let's be real, it's not just for show. The evilness behind that grin seems to carry over into real life. When you consider his background, it's no surprise. His entire family has deep ties to one of the most notorious gangs out there, the Crips.
Mama a deuce, my daddy a deuce. Originally.
Oh, so your mama bangs too?
I mean, not no more. She had kids. My granny a deuce.
Your grandmother.
My granddaddy, they helped start the neighborhood shit.
We're talking about a legacy of danger, with his dad, mom, and even his grandparents all being part of the Six Deuce Crips. This crew originally hailed from the 62nd and San Pedro streets in Los Angeles, and they helped spread the gang's influence. So it's safe to say that Grimey's got a bit of that sinister edge running through his veins.
I'm a Six Deuce Crip. Neighborhood Crip.
One incident that really shows the dark side of 30 Deep Grimeyy involves another rapper named KB6X. Now, KB6X made the fatal mistake of dropping an unprovoked diss track aimed at Grimeyy. Not long after, he ended up getting shot and killed.
Street, the third man shot crashed a car near the scene before he died. The fourth victim rushed to a hospital in critical condition.
can't get past my D-line. 37 shots for a motherfucker.
And if you're wondering how Grimeyy reacted, well, he was literally laughing and dancing when he heard the news. That reaction alone led a lot of people to believe he might have had something to do with it. Whether he did or not, the fact that he could find joy in someone's death speaks volumes about his character. But here's the twist. Despite all the darkness surrounding him, Grimeyy actually has a certain charisma and media savvy that makes him a bit of an enigma. He's given some surprisingly thoughtful interviews, like when he offered tips on how to survive in the rough streets of St. Louis.
My tip is just, if you're in my city, try to get a ducked off hotel, ducked off as possible. Not no motel, a hotel. Somewhere you gotta catch an elevator to get to your room.
It's a side of him that's hard to reconcile with the persona he portrays in his music and videos. Because when you listen to his tracks or watch his videos, it's like he's possessed by some kind of demonic energy. In a city that's packed with trap rappers, Grimeyy manages to stand out not just because of his music, but also because of his look. His neck tattoos, his shiny gold teeth, and that skeleton tattoo on his hand. He's got this combination of a mean mug and this terrifying, almost gleeful energy. Like he could pop out of an alley, light up the block, and then laugh about it afterward. But it's that very persona that landed him in some serious trouble. Lots of rappers write diss tracks, but Grimeyy took it to a whole new level with his track Dead Goofies.
Grimeyy got down, nigga. Me and Grimeyy took the city, now these four niggas capping on the motherfucker. Only murder niggas.
This song isn't just a diss track. It's like a diss manifesto. There's no chorus, no auto-tune, just straight bars for 4 minutes, packed with so many specific names, street references, and callouts that if you're not from St. Louis, it's nearly impossible to follow. He goes all in, name-dropping every enemy he's got and rapping about real-life situations, like when he says Lil D tried creeping through that crib, and they shot his A through the door.
Lil D tried creeping through that crib, they shot his through the door. He say he's smoking on my brother, DP roller.
It's the kind of song that makes you wonder if he even considered the consequences, like incriminating himself or inviting retaliation. And just when it seemed like things might be looking up for Grimeyy, with his career starting to gain some momentum, everything came crashing down. He found himself on trial for a gun charge, and the prosecution painted him as the mastermind behind a whole bunch of gang activity. The judge wasn't buying any of his defenses and ended up handing him a 7.5-year prison sentence.
Los rapper is headed to prison on gun charges. Arthur Presley, also known as 30 Deep Grimeyy, was already a convicted felon. Presley will spend the next 7 years in prison.
In today's music industry, that kind of time can be a career killer, especially if you're not already at the top. It's a brutal blow for someone like Grimeyy, who was still on the rise. So who is 30 Deep Grimeyy really? How did he end up in this mess? And is there any chance he can get out of prison early and salvage what's left of his career? Let's dive in deeper. Arthur Presley, better known as 30 Deep Grimeyy, came into the world on August 21st, 1997, in St. Louis, Missouri. Growing up, life wasn't exactly picture perfect for young Arthur. His parents weren't together, so he split his time between them, juggling two different households. But if you ask him, having both parents around, even if they weren't together, was a blessing in itself. It gave him a sense of stability that a lot of kids in his situation didn't have. Living with his mom and three half-sisters on his mother's side, Arthur became the man of the house by default. But to Grimeyy, those half-sisters, they're his whole sisters, no question about it.
Okay, and you have 3 sisters.
Yeah, on my mom's side.
So these are all 3 half-sisters, right?
Nah, they like whole sisters though. Like where we come from, like half ain't that mean whole too.
When you're growing up in St. Louis, according to Grimeyy, you don't really get to decide whether you want to be in the streets or not. The streets make that decision for you, and they're not exactly shy about claiming their territory.
When I was a kid, like you can't in St. Louis, you don't choose the streets. The streets choose you. You know, like everybody in the street. Like even if you don't want to be.
The streets in St. Louis are greedy like that. They take who they want, and they don't leave much room for second chances. So despite his dad's best efforts, Grimeyy was destined for the life he ended up living. Grimey's dad had his own history with the streets. He hit the block early on to make ends meet, and was in and out of jail throughout Grimey's childhood. Luckily, he never spent too long locked up at any one time, and eventually he managed to pull himself out of the game and start his own business. But during those early years, when Grimeyy was just a kid, his dad was still knee-deep in that life. The guilt weighed heavy on him, though, and he knew he didn't want his son following in his footsteps.
Did your dad try to keep you out the streets? Or was this something like, well, I know that you're gonna get into it regardless, so let me kind of give you some pointers?
Both.
He felt the pressure of the hood and wanted to apply a different kind of pressure on Grimeyy. Positive pressure. He stayed on his son's case, constantly reminding him to stay off the block, to avoid the traps that had caught so many before him. But the streets had other plans. By the time Grimeyy was just 8 or 9 years old, he'd already seen things no kid should ever have to see. Lifeless bodies, street drama, and the harsh reality of the world he was growing up in.
7, 8, 9.
Can you say what that was?
It was a bad thing. It's a bad thing. It's a bad thing. I don't really want to say, but you know what I'm getting.
He was too far gone by then, already too deep in a lifestyle that had become all too familiar. He doesn't remember the exact age when he officially jumped off the porch and became fully immersed in the street life, but he knows for sure it was way too young. By the time his feet hit the pavement, gang life was something he knew all too well. For as long as he can remember, Grimeyy has been a member of the Six Deuce Crips, a gang usually associated with Los Angeles, but that found its way to St. Louis when some Crip members got arrested in the city. After getting out, they decided to stick around, and the gang became one of the original sets to make its mark on St. Louis culture. What's even wilder is that gang life wasn't just something Grimeyy stumbled into. His family was deep in it too. His dad, his mom, even his grandma at one point were all down with the set. It's almost like gang life was a family tradition, passed down from generation to generation.
Mama a deuce, my daddy a deuce, originally.
Oh, so your mama bangs too?
I mean, not no more. She had kids. She gave that lifestyle love for me. She said I saved her when she had me. She had me at 17, but my granny a deuce.
Your grandmother.
My granddaddy, they helped start the neighborhood.
Even though Grimeyy was affiliated with the Six Deuce Crips, he admits he never took the whole gang thing too seriously. It was more of a circumstance than a commitment. In fact, one of his closest friends is a Blood now, so he's not really caught up in all the rivalry between Crips and Bloods. To him, an enemy is an enemy, no matter what color they're repping. If you're an op, you're an op, plain and simple. Before he was even old enough to legally buy a pack of cigarettes, Grimeyy found himself in serious trouble. He got caught with a gun, and the cop who arrested him seemed like he was out to make an example of Grimeyy. That arrest marked the beginning of a rocky road with the law. Over the years, Grimeyy racked up 2 felonies, one for that gun charge and another for shooting from a moving car. When it came time to face the consequences, Grimeyy played it smart and pled guilty so he could qualify for probation. But staying out of trouble proved easier said than done. He eventually broke probation and ended up behind bars for nearly a year. That stretch in jail was one of the hardest periods in Grimey's life. Not only was he locked up, but while he was in there, he lost his brother to the same street drama he was trying to survive.
How old was your brother when he got killed?
About 18.
How bad did it affect you when you found out?
Very bad.
The worst part? Grimeyy wasn't allowed to attend his brother's funeral. The county labeled him a flight risk, so he had to mourn behind bars, which was a different kind of pain. It was a time when he couldn't even grieve properly, because shedding tears in jail or on the streets was seen as a sign of weakness.
You just cried in your cell, man.
Fuck no, I ain't crying.
At that point.
I ain't crying.
You didn't cry when your own brother got killed?
Normally, we don't cry in the streets. You let see you cry, you let niggas see you weak and wrong, test that gangster, you know?
But once Grimeyy got out, he decided to switch things up and pull a move that a lot of street rappers are known for. He decided to take rap seriously. Grimeyy had been messing around with rap since his early teens, spitting bars with his friends and cousin. At first, he went by the name Law Arthur, which, let's be real, isn't exactly the tough street name you'd expect from a guy like him. But as he got deeper into the street life, he earned the name Grimeyy, a nickname that stuck because it fit his reputation on the block. Eventually, he added 30 Deep to his name to represent how deep he and his crew rolled around their neighborhood. As Grimeyy started spending more time in the studio and really honing his craft, he linked up with a homie from his neighborhood, NWMC Murder. Together, they dropped a joint mixtape called Blast Brothers in December 2019. The tape started to make some serious noise, not just locally but beyond, thanks to tracks like No Cap and Grimey's solo hit Dead Goofies. That last one, Dead Goofies, really blew up. The gritty video, which was packed with guns, grills, and a bunch of specific disses aimed at his enemies, caught fire online. The video is now sitting at around 16 million views on YouTube.
Claim me beef with 30 deep, bitch, when the fuck did y'all score? Street caught him lacking on that Westler blood, put on his cleat.
Despite how menacing and raw the video was, one thing was clear. 30 Deep Grimeyy had real talent. He wasn't just another street rapper trying to make a name off controversy. He could really rap. And with that kind of skill, he was on his way to making a serious mark in the game. After the buzz from Dead Goofies started to really take off, 30 Deep Grimeyy knew he had to capitalize on the momentum. He started dropping more heat, including tracks like Grim Reaper Flow with NLE Choppa and King Von, both of whom were heavy hitters in the rap game. He even linked up with Maxo Cream for a track called Handicap Crippin', which only solidified his rising status in the industry. With the success of these tracks, Grimeyy made a smart decision to move away from St. Louis to focus more on his music. It was a wise move, showing that he was thinking ahead and trying to distance himself from the street life that had always been a part of his world. But as they say, you can take the rapper out of the streets, but you can't always take the streets out of the rapper. And unfortunately for Grimeyy, trouble followed him even as he tried to make a fresh start. In 2021, things took a serious turn when Grimeyy found himself in hot water with the law again. This incident would go on to have a major impact on his life and freedom. Prosecutors from the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Missouri brought charges against Arthur Presley, known to the world as 30 Deep Grimeyy, for being a felon in possession of a firearm. It all went down on the night of January 5th, 2021, when Grimeyy and some others were cruising around in a 2008 Pontiac G8. A St. Louis police officer noticed the car had a taillight out and the license plate was registered to a Jeep, not the Pontiac they were driving. That was enough reason to pull them over. When the cops searched the car, they found a Beretta 92 FS9mm pistol sitting between Grimeyy and another passenger. Not exactly the kind of thing you want to get caught with, especially if you've got a criminal record. As part of his plea deal, Grimeyy admitted to having the gun on multiple occasions starting from October 4th, 2020, just one day after it was purchased, up until the night of the traffic stop. To make matters worse, investigators dug up photos of Grimeyy posing with the gun on his social media accounts, along with pictures on the accounts of his associates. For someone with his past, this wasn't just a minor slip-up. Grimeyy had already been convicted twice for unlawful use of a weapon, making him a convicted felon. And now he was facing some serious consequences. His trial took a while to get rolling, finally kicking off in 2023, almost a year and a half after the initial incident. Typically, sentencing hearings for felons in possession don't last too long, usually about an hour. But Grimey's hearing was different. It stretched on for hours, starting at 9:30 a.m. and not wrapping up until around 2 p.m. This wasn't your average run-of-the-mill sentencing, it was a big deal. The courtroom was packed with people, way more than you'd usually see at a sentencing hearing. The recommended sentencing guidelines for Presley's alleged crime, considering his criminal history, were between 41 and 51 months. But Assistant U.S. Attorney Cassandra Wiemken wasn't having it. She went all in, pushing for Judge Stephen Clark to hand down the maximum possible sentence of 10 years. Wiemken argued that Presley deserved the longer sentence because he supposedly kept a gun on him constantly and was a crew leader who had no respect for the law. She didn't hold back during the hearing either, showing photos from social media of Presley holding firearms and playing clips from his music videos. In one clip, the rapper is seen simulating an act right outside the courthouse where his hearing was taking place. Grimeyy, on the other hand, tried to explain where he was coming from. My rap name is an image I have to portray. I have a certain type of fan base, he told the judge. But he wasn't just talking about the persona. He was trying to make it clear that behind 30 Deep Grimeyy, there's a real person, Arthur Presley. He added, "I feel like I'm being targeted because of my rap name. I'm Arthur Presley. I'm a human being." It's a reminder that these rappers, despite the tough exterior they put out there, are indeed actual people with real lives and real struggles. The problem is that when those tough images from social media and music videos match the lyrics, which might reflect real-life events, it becomes all too easy for the court to assume that art is imitating life. It's not the same for actors in Hollywood, where they can portray violent characters without anyone assuming they're like that in real life. But when it comes to rap, we all know the deal. The lines between art and reality often get blurred. Wiemken tried to downplay the whole rapper thing, saying it was mostly irrelevant to the case. But she argued that the music videos showing Presley with weapons were clear evidence that he had guns despite being a convicted felon. And that wasn't all. She painted Presley as the leader of the so-called 30 Deep gang, whose members had been involved in assaults and other crimes. In her eyes, he wasn't just a rapper. He was the head of a criminal operation. But Grimey's attorney, Lenny Kagan, wasn't buying it. He called the prosecutor's argument an unbelievable leap, basically saying they were reaching. He pointed out that when Grimeyy was arrested, the authorities searched him and 2 of his homes and didn't find any illegal substances or guns. "This is your alleged gang leader?" he asked, pushing back hard on the idea that 30 Deep was even a gang at all. Kagan argued that 30 Deep was more of a brand, like how Kanye West has Yeezy. He was adamant that just because Grimeyy raps about certain things doesn't mean he's actually involved in those activities. The prosecutors tried to spin it like Grimeyy was rapping about real crimes that his peers had committed, but Kagan shot that down too. He made it clear that just because someone raps about something, it doesn't prove they're involved in it. He also questioned why all of this gang stuff was even being brought up in the first place when the charge was simply for being a felon in possession of a firearm. It felt to Grimeyy like he was being put on trial for something way bigger, like a homicide, instead of just the charge at hand. After everything was said and done, Judge Clark took more than an hour to deliberate in his chambers before returning to the bench to deliver Grimey's sentence. When he finally spoke, he handed down 92 months, just shy of the maximum the prosecution had asked for.
This rapper is headed to prison on gun charges. Arthur Presley, also known as 30 Deep Grimeyy, was already a convicted felon. Presley will spend the next 7 years in prison.
Judge Clark didn't hold back in his final statement, declaring that the 30 Deep gang was indeed a street gang and that Grimeyy, aka Arthur Presley, was its leader. You can bet he really took his time pondering that one. Out in the courthouse lobby before the judge delivered the sentence, Grimey's manager, Jeremy Phipps, who goes by J Phipps, was already trying to put a positive spin on things. He was hyping up the new album Presley just dropped, titled Let Me In. Gotta admit, the irony of that title is pretty thick considering the circumstances, but J Phipps explained it like this: he wants to be let into the industry. That's why it's called Let Me In. According to Phipps, the tracks on the album reflect everything Grimey's been feeling lately. Presley teamed up with producer Ali Knopp to bring the album to life, and Knopp was right there in court, standing by Grimeyy. "Me and him had a nice run together, and we will continue to have a nice run together," Knopp said, though you could sense a hint of uncertainty behind those words. You could almost imagine him thinking that their best days might already be behind them, given the situation. But Jay Phipps was still riding the wave of optimism, insisting that Grimey's got more heat on the way. He mentioned that Grimey's sitting on 2 more albums ready to drop. You gotta wonder if there's even more stashed away in the vault. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. It's hard not to feel a bit down about the whole situation though. Grimeyy had the talent and was definitely making moves in the rap game, but just when it seemed like he was on the brink of something big, the streets caught up to him. It's really unfortunate, especially for a guy with his kind of potential. If he'd just had a little more time to shine, maybe things would have played out differently. Maybe he could have built up more clout, enough to keep the income flowing while he's on the inside. We all know he's not gonna serve the full stretch of his sentence. He'll likely get out early with good behavior. And from what we've seen, Grimeyy is a solid dude, so he's probably gonna take this time on the chin, do what he needs to do, and come out stronger. But it's still a shame to see someone with his level of talent get caught up like this. It's a story we see too often. Just as they're about to break through, the streets pull them back in.